Listen, what we don't know about this guy could fill a book. So let's just kick it off with the only thing that matters. Ironman world champion, Pete Jacobs. Do you have a good side? Do you care? We're in Hollywood. These things matter here.
This is good.
All right. If you will, I would really love it if you could walk us chronologically through grade school and high school and give us an idea of what sports you dabbled in when you were growing up.
Started swimming when I was about 3. I've got an older brother and sister, so I kind of followed them through everything. Swimming led into nippers, which is surf lifesaving, which is competitions in and out of the surf. When I was about probably 8, started that. And then continued nippers right through, doing a triathlon maybe once or twice a year because my mum started doing triathlons when I was probably in my, probably 10 or 12 years old or something. So started doing a couple as I grew up because there was a pretty good tri-club where I lived, but still was just doing surf lifesaving. So I swam in the pool probably 2 or 3 times a week, pretty much every week of the year almost. And then as I got a bit older, I didn't want to get in the pool as often as I did. So probably when I was about, I left school, started my landscaping apprenticeship. So when I was 18, I started working. And somewhere in that time, I took a break from the serious swimming at a pool. Well, I never swam seriously. I only ever swam 2 or 3 times a week. And took a break from that and swam at my local pool, which was just with older guys, triathletes. Nothing real serious, but they were doing Ironman. And I'd never heard of Ironman. First time I heard of Ironman was probably in about 1999 or 2000.
Now, wait a minute. You were in the nippers. Yeah. Ironman meant something else to you maybe when you were looking up.
Yeah.
Because in Australia you have an Ironman competition for lifeguards essentially, which is a different activity.
Swimming, board paddling and ski paddling. And there's not a lot of running involved. So in school also, I always won my school cross country and made it to district and regionals. But I never trained seriously as a runner either. So I was just naturally good at endurance sports and always swam. And was always a pretty good runner. But then once I turned about 18, 19, decided that I wanted a more definite challenge for my sporting ability than surf, where it's very dependent on the surf, the luck of the waves, and there's no running involved. And I just did love to run. I knew I loved to run. We lived right near the bush, and I'd just run through the bush. That was my training that I did often with the dog. And so finally I start swimming just with this group of guys, and they'll do the hour swim squad in the evening, and then they'll do an hour run or 45-minute run afterwards. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'll do that. So I started doing that, and before I knew it, I did a season, decided, okay, with my first paycheck pretty much, first 10 months of work, I bought a tri bike, a Norco bike for $1,500, and started doing triathlons that season, and loved it, did a few different distances, and just loved the half distance so much more than anything else. Qualified the following year, or in 2001 I qualified for the following year for the Ironman. So in Australia back then you had to qualify in a half and accept your spot on the day after the race. You had to hang around, and remember when I stood up, and everyone keeps quoting it, that's why I remember it, that mum was like, what are you doing? Why are you taking your spot for an Ironman? So I was only 20 years old. And, it was all very new, 12 months before I didn't know what an Ironman was. So I should say 3 years before I didn't know what an Ironman was, when I just started about 18, 19, following these older guys. And, that was it. From that point, I left surf lifesaving behind and just started riding with these old guys. And, one of the guys taught me how to ride. He wasn't a great Ironman triathlete. Right. But he taught me how to spin. And so from day one on the bike, I put in the easiest gear up the hills and spun up hills and was riding in circles from day one. And, that really helped. And, he taught me trying how to run efficiently, which that helped for a while, a different technique to how I run now. And, but that was really helpful as well. And then probably, and then I just always swam. So my first Ironman in 2002 as an age grouper, I swam through the professionals and came out of the water first and got a huge buzz from it. And, this is a huge event back then in Australia.
And this first Ironman was in Australia.
What was that?
Or was it in Hawaii? Yes.
Yeah, my first Ironman was Australia, Foster.
Foster, okay.
So I raced there in 2002.
And you passed all the pros. You came out of the water first.
Yeah.
What was your swim split on that day?
Oh, I don't know. It was about 47, I think it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
So.
all right, we're going to come back to that. That's fine.
So
Let's
that's
leave that
up to
there for a
there,
second. Okay. All right, so that's your first Ironman.
Yep.
And as an age grouper, you won your age group. You were only 20 at the time.
Second.
You got second.
By a couple of places or a couple of minutes.
All right.
But I hit my target times exactly. And I remember meeting some older guys on the way to Foster, and they were like, you know, I told them what I wanted to do, and I'm all of 20 years old, never done an Ironman. Yeah, I want to swim like about a, you know, sub 50. I want to ride like a 5:15 and then run about a 3.5 and do 9.5 hours. And the guy's like, you know, oh yeah, and they tell me later they walked away and we're just like, there's no way this guy's gonna, wow, he's living in fairyland. But that first year I nailed it, and I found it easy, and it's still to this day, it's one of the easiest Ironmans I've ever done. Because it was my first one, there was no pressure, and of course comes back to I didn't overtrain.
Right.
So the next year I hooked up with a physio, sports physiologist who was doing his PhD, and he got me in the lab to do some of his testing, and he tested my VO2 while doing his testing and all these other things, and he wrote me a program as well. I was doing some great training and some great sessions, and went into that thinking I could go top 10 here, you know, as an age group. I want to go top 10. I want to do an 8.5 hour Ironman. I did 10.5 hours.
Oh.
Because I'm on the bike and I'm like, want to go back to bed.
This is your sophomore effort. This is your second Ironman. And I think this is true for many age groupers, is they get a little plagued, which is you went 9:30 for your first, and it felt easy, and now you go back in your second effort and you want to race it, really.
Yeah.
And you end up actually going a little bit backwards.
Yeah, a lot backwards, yeah. So I just wanted to go back to bed, and luckily then I got a flat tire, and I was happy I got a flat tire because it just gave me a break to go, gave me an excuse to go, okay, this is not my day, you know, but really, you know, then struggled through the rest of it, struggled through the run, did 10.5 hours, and, you know, it took me another 6 years to learn that lesson.
And have you raced Ironmans all the way through this time? Because that was at age 21 then.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, about then in 2003, that was my second one.
Okay.
In 2004, I then went pro. So I'd finished my apprenticeship between 2000 and 2004, and then turned professional and went and raced Ironman New Zealand, got 5th, and then about 4 weeks later got 4th in Australia. And then went over and stayed here in LA with a few other people in this audience, and trained really hard, and went over there and was fatigued and DNF'd.
Yeah, okay.
So still hadn't, yeah, like I say, it's kind of a repetitive story.
So that was your first attempt at Kona.
Yeah.
And a DNF was the result.
Yeah.
And what year was this?
2004.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I turned around, and about several weeks later I raced Bustleton,
Yeah.
Ironman Western Australia, and I think I got second that year, maybe second or third, something like that. Yeah. And then just kept chipping away for the next 6 years.
Now I have to say that in terms of having Ironman world champions out there, you know, for you not to have, say, a Wikipedia page, seems pretty startling. You know, for many of us, I think maybe in Europe and perhaps in North America, you know, you're not really on the radar. Like, sure, you got second last year, and that was a big deal, and now you're the champion. But do you feel like there's I mean, in Australia, you're known.
Yeah.
But in North America and Europe, are you feeling like you're still flying under the radar a little bit? Well, or until
yeah, it
this year.
It definitely felt that way going into it, and you know, I didn't mind that because it's the way that everyone has looked at who do we focus on. Oh, we'll focus on the guys that have performed really well this year, not the guys that just do well at Hawaii. And if anyone ever asks me, so who do you think will do well at Hawaii? It's like, well, just look at history. Who's gone top 10 for the last 4 years, and they're the guys that are going to do well again.
Right.
And someone in the UK did a really good analysis of the percentages of who could win. And from those percentages, they came up with 5 names who could possibly win. You know, the guys that have won it before, the guys that have gone top 3 in the previous 2 years, and the guys that have gone top 5 in the previous 1 year or something. Like, there was a very small criteria. And it was Mcdougall, myself, might have been Andreas Raylett, and then, you know, one other, like, I think
Van Hohenacker or?
Yeah, Van Hohenacker or Bockel or even Keenlade, just because he'd just come from winning Vegas.
Just come from 70.3.
So yeah, if you look at the numbers, and I'm like, that's what I've always followed. So they followed it, they knew it, and yet other people tend to focus on, hey, who's done well this year, not who does well in Hawaii every year. And Hawaii is just it's almost, everyone says, oh, do you ever do ITU? And I say, well, that's a different sport. You can almost look at Hawaii as a different sport.
From all the other Ironmans around the world.
Yeah.
And why is that? Is it just because of the pressure or the course, or what makes it so?
Definitely the pressure. Yeah, a lot of guys I talk to, go in there and they're overtrained, the pro guys. So the pressure of just getting there in better shape than ever before.
Right.
Probably also, the course, the heat, guys that go there and train or train in hot conditions to acclimatise beforehand end up being dehydrated, like without knowing it. Their muscles may be a little bit dehydrated, and I know Macca talks about that in his book, how someone told him, you're dehydrating your body long term too much when you train there for too long. And guys go there a month before the race to train, and it's just crazy. I just don't think you could rehydrate well enough throughout training and then race. And also, I don't believe in, as Macca kind of does as well, the acclimatizing thing, acclimations you call it. You're either able to or you're not able to. I think it's more of a mental thing. Acclimatizing is more what the differences, the changes are that you sweat more. So it's like, well, why do you want to sweat more when you've got to refuel, you rehydrate for that long of a race? And all you're going to try and train your body to do is sweat more to keep cool. Well, maybe if you're out in the middle of the desert and, you need to run for just a set time and you need to keep cool and you haven't got aid stations to throw over yourself, those sort of things. But, if you're training, if everyone asks me, what about the heat? I say it's more mental preparation.
Okay.
So, as long as I've got a couple of hot days back wherever I am training, a few hot days throughout other cooler days, to just go out there and do my session in the middle of the day and push myself through those hot conditions and mentally be like, this is what it feels like, this is what your body's going to do, this is how much harder it is. They're the key sessions for my acclimation. Nothing really to do with getting the body acclimatized.
Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about other things you do in training, and then I'd like to kind of bring them in and apply them to the race day that you had in Kona this year. So I don't think you swim a lot now.
No.
I read in your blog that there are some times of the year when you swim very little, and then even during the season, clearly swimming, because you grew up swimming and because that was really your first sport, you've got the technique wired, you're good at it. So what's a huge week for you?
15 Ks, but I don't know if I hit that very often at all or ever. This year,
right? Okay,
maybe. This week it was like 8 to 10 average, I'd say.
And
for the last.
You're getting that done in what? Three workouts?
Yeah.
3 workouts a week.
4. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty startling. There's a lot of guys swimming much more than that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's technique that I've worked on. I haven't swum in a squad for like 5 years or something.
So you're swimming solo these 8 to 10K that you're swimming a week when you're Wow.
So swimming, and guys that I give technique sessions to, I say, look, don't get back in a squad until you've got your technique, until you can actually go through your technique and do an assessment of every muscle while you're swimming. Because guys get in a squad and it's like, okay, I've got to get on their feet, and what time do I have to go? And the person behind me is waiting for me to go, and I've just got to make sure I make this time cycle. I don't want to move down into the slower lane. And, it's just, you cannot focus on your technique when you've got all this other white water and times and all that other stuff. And then you're tired on top of that from swimming and biking. So if you get in and you're being pushed hard in a squad and you've got to make these times that you can't really make, you get out, you haven't focused on your technique for 1 second in a squad, for a lot of guys. So yeah, I do all my swimming on my own. If I get in and I feel good, I do a good set, which would maybe be like, 5 400s. And, I really like my 400s when I'm feeling good. And if I'm feeling lousy, I'll just get in and do, just try and swim through 3K. And sometimes I just tell myself, I take myself back to our ancestors and think I'm just swimming from one island to the other. I'm just like, I have to get there to get some food or something, or make it to the next village. And that's sometimes just what I tell myself, to switch off and just keep swimming and just make the 3K. I don't have to, you know, and I do that in running as well. I get out there and I sometimes just do my easy run and I say, this is just jogging back to the village, Pete, after a hunting, you know, that you did yesterday. This is not trying to do it fast. This is just trying to do it nice and easy. And I use those little games in my mind to relax my mind, relax my body, and make sure I don't overtrain, that I'm not always pushing my body, that I do take those little breaks.
Okay. Now, so you're in the water the morning of the race, and the men go off first, the pro men do. And were you eyeing anyone in particular that you wanted to try and get on their feet and go, or what was your
No, this year was very different. I went into it this year. Other years I have kind of gone, oh, I want to get on Potsy's feet and go with him and get away from the pack. And then the last like 3 years, I've gotten away, stayed with him for maybe a kilometre, and then drifted off his feet. And then the guys catch me just, you know, on the way back in.
Right.
And then I thought, you know, that time where I'm drifting off Andy's feet is a bit stressful, and I do kind of push a bit to try and stay with him a bit longer. And I thought this year, it's not going to make any difference. I'm going to come out with that front pack either way. So let's just sit in the pack this year. So this year, you know, I got on the start line. For some reason this year, everyone was over to the right near the pier, which never happens because it's like kind of on a bit of an angle out to the first buoy. I'm kind of asking the guys around me, why is everyone over there? Like, it's just one of those weird things. It was probably like, there was probably a couple of guys over there, and then a couple of other guys saw them, and then a couple of other guys saw them, right. And everyone just kind of followed like sheep, as they do. They do tend to do that. And you've got to be confident in your own skill, your own reading of the course, and your own starting in your own water as well. So, you know, I was kind of in the middle, and then, you know, just a couple of minutes before, I was a bit too many guys just near me, and so I went further left, and wasn't the furthest left by any means, but just where it was just a little fewer guys, but you know, straight away. So I had no idea who I was near. I had no idea where Andy Potts was, and in terms of swimmers, wasn't looking for anyone else either. So then I just took off and took it easy, because that swim start, you can't get away from someone if they're on their hip, and trying to get away from them, all that does is waste your energy, because if someone's on your hip, it slows you down. So I took it really easy at the start, and only when it really started to squeeze together, that's when I just go, okay, I've just got to 10, 20 hard strokes, and just to get my head just in front of theirs, so that when it does come to a bottleneck, I'm the one that goes through. And so
okay, I want to stop right there for 1 second, because I think there's a nugget for our audience here that might be of value. When you're on someone's hip, it slows down the lead swimmer.
Yeah.
So not only are you getting the benefit of the draft, but it also taxes them a little bit.
Yeah.
Is that the same when you're on their feet?
No. If you're on their feet, like, I don't believe having someone on your feet slows you down.
Okay.
But you still get the advantage. But the advantage on someone's hip is greater. You can just really cruise, and you just get sucked. If you can find that pocket right there, yeah, it's just, you just get sucked along. You don't have to do anything.
So rather than chasing Andy this year, you just kind of settle in, you give a little surge in the beginning just to kind of get this little separation. And then did you find yourself in a pack where you were working pretty gently? Yeah,
Andy's off the front, and then I was for what I could see, you know, I was second row back, and it was too wide, and I was boxed in there, and yeah, it was the easiest swim I've ever done. And I'm just kind of thinking that as I swim, I'm like, man, everybody is going to be in this pack. This is the easiest swim I've ever done. Surely we're doing like a 55-minute swim or something. And then at some point, you know, people do come up, and it changes a little bit. So as we got close to the turnaround buoy, it was changing, and I got pushed out to the inside and thought, well, I've got to get a move here. I don't want to be pushed back as we get to that can. So I went to the front as we went round the turning buoys. And as we went round, I then made my way, and I was leading as by the time we kind of hit the real apex, came back in. I thought, well, I'll just surge and see what happens. Maybe one or two come with me. Maybe that breaks up the pack if they're, you know, because we've been going so slow. And so I surged for a few hundred meters and kind of kept looking behind, and they were still coming along. So I thought, oh, forget it. All right, we're still all together. They're still here. And get back on, and then chatting with Macca after the race. That surge, he was on Dirk Bockle's feet around the turning buoy. Dirk Bockle lost their pack there. So that
and took Macca with him.
Took Macca with him, and probably half a dozen other guys as well that maybe had to swim around or work harder. So it's things like that then where I am aware that that happens. So sometimes on a race I'll go to the front not because it's of any advantage to me, but because I know it's a disadvantage to the guys that then that pack is chasing me, which makes someone has to lead that pack, which means that will string out, which might break off the next pack.
Right, sure.
And that's pretty much what I did at that turning buoy without thinking it did I didn't think it did anything at that stage, but afterwards Macca's like, yeah, I dropped off that pack, and I was like, oh, sorry about that. But now we're even, because the year that he won a couple of years back, he sat on my hip and got on my feet at the start, and he had the best swim he's ever had there. And that was his plan, and I said, yeah, come start with me. And so, you know.
So when you stand up out of the water, you're done with the swim and you run up, does it matter to you at that time your position? Do you care?
Yeah, slightly. It's pretty hectic through grabbing bags and getting out on the bike. It's pretty hectic. So I'd much prefer to be, you know, standing up second or third than standing up seventh or eighth.
So then do you position somebody at that point to announce to you where you are?
No, well, I know I'm at the front of that pack, and Andy's always off the front.
Because you're keeping track as you're swimming, so you know Andy's off the front.
And I like I said, I stood up right in the front of our pack and got out third out of the water. Okay. So it was pretty clear running through transition. You know, but getting onto the bike, it's hectic. You know, being on the front and that first sort of few K through town, or 10K, I don't know. Yeah. People don't obey the laws of drafting there.
Right.
So people are pulling in illegally, like right in front. So I went from third onto the bike back to about 13th by the time we hit the top of Palani, and every pass would have been illegal. I even got passed on the inside, on the right. So it's pretty rough, and I didn't want to be back there, but there's nothing you can do about it, because unless you want to be the drafter that's sitting so close to the bike in front that no one will pull in at all,
right?
You know, it's just risking just craziness.
All right, I want to ask about gear, because you know, as an age group triathlete, we get bombarded by marketing from all different sorts of things, and I want to know if you wore a swim skin during the swim.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The Tier Torque.
You wore a Tier Torque, and is it it's long leg, but no. It's thigh length.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything has to be
fine.
FINA rules.
And then underneath that,
my race suit.
Okay. And do you wear a two-piece or a one-piece?
Two-piece.
All right. Good.
I think two pieces. I've always worn two-piece for a long time. I just think it's so much cooler. You know, think about the heat coming up a chimney,
right,
like through your body. And also just being able to chuck ice and water down your pants.
Sure.
It helps a lot on the run.
If
you haven't been there, you will do it. Don't laugh, you'll do it when you get there.
You know, we have these places where major arteries are near our skin, so to dump some ice down the front of your suit and have it really sit against those veins really helps your legs.
Yeah, and then it just melts and keeps your thighs cool. Yep. And yeah, it's nice.
Okay, so I don't know if you've seen it, but let me just seen the video on YouTube. But let me just bring it up because I want to ask if you've spoken to Mac about this. At the mountain line this year at Kona, there was an incident, and I think it was Van Hohenacker getting on his bike. And Van Hohenacker doesn't have the ITU style of mount; it's not a flying mount. So he really came to a stop, lifted his leg over the top tube, and was clipping in and was getting ready to go in what we would generally consider a modest mount. Mac, on the other hand, flying mount onto his bike, and while he's sort of looking down to make sure he's met the saddle properly and he's rolling forward, runs into the back of Marino Van Hohenacker. In fact, his front wheel was on the drive side of the bike, and I'm just going to leave it at that. I don't want to go any further than that. Meanwhile, Dirk Bockle is mounting and is trying to pass Mac on the right, and Mac is essentially falling now and bounces off Bockle and puts Bockle into the fence, and it's not pretty. Later, Van Hohenacker claims that Macca bent his derailleur hanger and left him with only 2 gears for the entire ride. Pretty shocking because he came off the bike first and had a very powerful bike ride. McCormick claims that he was behind Van Hohenacker a lot and saw him shifting the full cassette and that there wasn't an issue at all. I love this little spat. Have you spoken to Chris about this?
Yeah, because I saw the video and I've seen Chris since I saw the video. I was like, Chris, what's going on? He's like, oh, that, you know. I was like, yeah, but you had your head down. Oh, he was coming across on the side. He wasn't going straight. He should have just gone left. And it's like, yeah, but you had your head down though. It's like, you know, what can you say?
All right. And by this time, you're already on the bike and gone because you.
Yeah, because they lost the pack split. So.
Okay, so you're riding, and I'm looking out here. There are many athletes in this room who have finished an Ironman, and there are several in here who have done Kona, some of them many times. Holger, I'm looking at you. And so walk us through the first, you know, we do this kind of roundabout where we get up to the Queen K, and then we come down Palani, and then we do an out and back, and come back up Palani, and then head out. So that whole zone right there, you know, you get on the bike in third spot, but by the time you're done with that and headed out on the Queen K, you slip back to 13th.
Yeah.
So are you managing that initial part of the ride just by how you feel, or do you have some telemetry on the bike that you're reading off of?
No, that's a pretty hectic part of the course. Like I said, everybody's passing to try and just get in a better spot. And if you leave a gap of, you know, 10 meters, which you're meant to leave 12, you know, someone will just jump in there because they want to get up. And so heading back, but it's just like so on and off. And, you know, it's not what I'm strong at. I'm not strong at those short, fast bursts.
Yeah.
So, you know, I drop back, and all I can do is just wait. And I know that when I get to the Queen K, I'm going to have to do some work. But last year I was prepared. I felt so good a week before the race last year on a ride there, you know, that I was like, I could have a good ride here. I think I could go really well. So I had to dig up Palani last year and got to the top of Palani in about second or third. But then, you know, it was maybe a bit too soon to have my effort up Palani. And then, you know, I just felt flat and I just couldn't sustain it and just kept dropping back and back and back last year. But this year, everything was more controlled this year. I was just more in control of everything. So in the swim, I took it easier. On the start of the bike, I didn't have a go at Palani. I just took my time and just went normal pace. And then when we got to the Queen K, it's like, okay, looking up the road, I need to get up there because that roller coaster effect does not suit me because I'm not a powerful bike rider. So the downhills, I'm not as strong as these heavier, stronger guys. And I hate it. I hate that, you know, you have to put the brakes on as that everyone slows down and hits the hill, and then you've got to work your ass off on the downhills to then keep that gap small. And if the gap opens up, someone overtakes you, and it's just a nightmare. So, but at the same time, trying to pick the gap to overtake in Kona is really difficult because if everybody's 12 meters apart, you have to overtake everybody. So, you know, I'm back in about 13th and I want to get up to about second or third or something, but I don't want to have to overtake everybody at once because it's so undulating. If I time it wrong and there's no gaps and I have to keep going and somebody else pulls out and accelerates as well, I'll be stuck out there and I'll get a penalty like I did last year. Yeah, last year, something like that. And so this year I was more patient and just waited and waited for a flat section of road and where I could just do like 2 or 3 bikes at a time, or even just 1 bike at a time. So if that person let a gap open up was too big and it was a flat section, I took them. So probably after about 20 miles or so, you know, I'm up in about maybe 7th or 8th, and there's a gap. I can now see a gap up the road where 4 guys have gone up the road, and I can see Crowie bridging across to them. And, you know, I'm thinking, geez, why is Crowie going? The pack isn't going with him. And I'm like, well, but there's my gap. You know, but now I've got to do about 4 or 5 guys
to get to that gap.
Get to that gap.
Right.
And so I just had to be patient, wait for a flat section where I could just get my momentum up and just go with momentum and get in that gap. And then once I got to the front of that, I then wanted to keep going to try and get to Crowie. So then I started getting to Crowie, and I'm looking back going, holy shit, I'm the guy pulling the pack this year. This is insane. This isn't right. So I'm pulling the pack up to Crowie. As I get to Crowie, he looks back a couple of times, pulls off to the side and sits up a bit. And I'm like, oh, is that mechanical or is that, don't know what. But he was still making up ground to the front few guys. So he suddenly pulled out, still left a gap. And in that space of me bridging that last sort of 70 to 100 meters, I bridged that gap. Everyone probably looked at Crowie going, oh, Crowie's back here now, it's okay. And I went off and joined that pack, and the rest of the pack stalled, and that was where I joined the front pack, and their split was permanent. And once we got through Kauai High,
yep,
probably about getting to the 40-mile mark, I guess, or maybe not there, 35, 40 miles, you know, and then through there, I sort of got to the front just as we started the next set. Went to the front and just felt good, and I ride better on the front. I'm not strong on the downhills, but once I've got my momentum, I'm good on the uphills, can power over them, and I just got to the front and loved it and just went with it.
But once you made the turn at Javi, you've got that long descent coming back down, and if you're not strong on the downhills, then...
Yeah, but this year was different because we already had like a few minutes, it seems like we already had
So the gap was already big enough.
Already 2 minutes. Keenlay and Voenacker had joined us on the climb up, and you know they were making a break as we got past that turnaround. But it was just sort of myself and Luke McKenzie and Freddie Van Leerd, and I was like, yeah, I was holding Luke on the downhill there, and I thought, well, if I'm with Luke, I'm going okay. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, we did that. I'm sure other guys did that section quicker, but marginally quicker. I think we were just riding well, and so. We get down the road, we pass Keenlay, he's got a flat tyre. I'm leading the pack most of the way through there. And then Bockle's caught up, and sort of myself, Bockle, and Luke McKenzie drops off, and Freddie Van Leerd's still there. And pretty much the three of us worked together from Kauai High back to town. And I had to take a break. I felt flat for a little while. I went to the back, and Bockle's quite a pushy guy. He's like, we take turns, come on, we take turns. And it's like, I can't, I just need a break. You know, I've been on the front for most of it, and then sure enough, once we sort of I had a little break, I started setting the pace on the uphills again, because they're bigger guys. I think I just ride the hills better. And so I was on the front for maybe the last 30 Ks, and they just let me lead into town. Okay,
so if we think back to the first bike you got, these guys from the squad program, the master's program you were swimming with, and this introduction to cycling, which really came from being a cadence guy, a spin guy first, and not a masher.
No.
Do you think your cycling today, at Kona this year, still lends itself to those roots of really being a guy who makes the bike go through cadence and not through torque?
Yeah, definitely. This year I reinvent my stroke and technique in swimming, running and cycling nearly every season.
Okay.
I think about it so much that I always feel a different rhythm or a different muscle that I've got to switch on or something. So this year, I was riding really well earlier this year, and because I wasn't running as much when I had the issue thing. And so I was riding, but it wasn't until I think when I started training for Kona in August, where I'm chatting with an ex-pro cyclist who's becoming a triathlete. And that was where I was like...
And this person's name is?
Oh, he's Casey Munro,
okay.
Just up-and-coming guy. But he sort of got me on the path of what I need. I do need a better... I need to figure out my taper. But I asked him, what do I need to do for taper? And I was kind of on the thought of what I do for running would work for cycling. For running, in Kona, I run on the Sunday, and I run on the Wednesday, and that's it.
Oh, interesting.
So I really rest up, and it works. And I figured, well, I just need to rest for cycling as well, because that's the kind of athlete I am. I just need my rest before I race. But he's like, no, cycling is the opposite to running. You start like, you know, long intervals, and then you get short and sharp, and because it's more strength. So you need to just keep those strength muscles firing right up to race day. Whereas running, you know, I start short, my program starts short sprints and builds towards my race pace and race distance. That's where my program goes. Whereas cycling, I don't have a program, I do what feels good. But doing what felt good for taper hasn't worked the last 6 years. So finally, when he said that to me, I was like, that makes sense, you know. So, and then I asked my ex-pro cyclist mate who's just retired, Henk Vogels, who used to ride for David Montelotto.
Sure.
He's the guy I got my last 2 week taper off, and that made a huge difference. So suddenly I had my sessions for the last 2 weeks, which were mostly sort of 5 minute and, 5 minute, 2 minute and 30-second efforts going from 2 weeks out right down to...
So the 30-second effort happens on what? Thursday before the race?
Yeah, Thursday before, 2 days before the race.
And how many?
Four.
4 of them.
Yeah.
And what's the duration of that ride? Is it 45 minutes? What is it?
Yeah, it was like an hour or so.
Okay.
An hour and a bit maybe.
All right. With 4 30-second efforts and the rest is just...
No, I think we did two
sets.
2 or 3 1-milers.
Oh, okay.
So as well. So it was about a couple of minutes, 2 or 3 of them, and then 4 30-second of those. And I happened to ride with Chris McCormack that day, and I was like, "Oh, what are you going to do?" And he's like, "Oh, I just kind of go out and I do like some short efforts or something." And I'm like, "Well, I go out. I've got this program here that says this." And he's like, "Yeah, that sounds good." So we combined actually, because mine was more like maybe 2K efforts, right. So more like, I don't know, slightly longer. And his was like, "Oh, I just go from this mile marker to the next one." So we did his section of that, and we did the 4 30-seconders, and you compromise whatever works so you can do a little bit together.
So these moments during the race when you felt flat, do you attribute those to nutritional dips within the race?
Nutrition was fairly good, but yeah, you can't keep up nutrition as much as you're burning it. Like you can't.
You're always going backwards.
So, or if it was just a time of, I was getting maybe slightly dehydrated, you lose, if your hydration levels drop below like 3%, you lose power. So whatever it was, just my body just needed, or whether it was just neurologically,
okay.
Muscles just needed to rest for a bit. And
all right,
but that's when that happens. That's like I haven't got the power to push, and the power didn't come back. It just after a rest, it got a little bit better, but more that my body recovered and. I was able to push a little bit more, but I was no longer able to push. It was definitely a constant decline throughout the race.
Well, and you're also in a position, because you're near the front now, where you don't have to force yourself through that flat.
Yeah, every 10 kilometers further that I went on the bike was like, okay, this is like another 30 seconds that I'm not going to lose to them off the bike. If they catch me now, I might stay with them, or I might only lose this much time. So that was every 10K was like, I'm a little bit closer to being off the bike with them. And then when they never caught me, it was like, jackpot.
All right, so I want to ask you about your nutrition. I want to first ask you this, because this is important. Do you have nutritional sponsors?
Yes.
Okay. Setting that aside, and who are they? Let's
it's just Shots Nutrition.
Okay, great.
They do electrolyte tabs and gels.
Okay. Now, so those of us who've been in the sport long enough have seen what looks good on paper and then what the truth is. So Paula Newby-Fraser is sponsored by Metrics for a long time, and yet there's this big glossy picture of her munching on a Twix bar during Kona. So right. There's what we're told and there's what the truth. And I'd love it if you could really share with us the truth of what you eat on the bike.
Yeah, well, I went through this with the owner of Shots just the other week. We met up and he wanted to know what I went through so he can think about it and we can just work towards it, where we could improve for next year. And I wake up and I have a gel in the morning and I eat a bar. I think I only got through 3/4 of a Shots energy bar. That's my breakfast. And then 10 minutes.
That's your breakfast?
Yeah. Well,
that's like 220 calories.
Yeah, something like that.
And it's not even real food, really. I mean, I'm sure the Shots product is excellent. That's not what I'm suggesting.
No,
I'm just suggesting there's
no
avocado in this, there's no oatmeal in this, there's no...
I have not had real food before a race, almost ever. Just never done it. My first Ironman, the guys that I did, the old Ironman guys, made up their own mixture of, basically off-the-shelf maltodextrin with something else mixed in, and it was all this. It was something that was really milky and gluggy, and to try and make it sweet, caramel sauce. So that was it. So and salt as well, and you chuck salt in that, and that worked quite well. And but that was for breakfast also. So from the first one, that's breakfast and that's what you eat all day.
Okay.
So I've never had anything in the morning and it just works well. And I don't eat before I do a long session and all of that sort of stuff in training. So my body feels good that way. So no real food.
All right.
10 minutes before the swim, a gel, just before I get in the water. And then the Shots gels are 117 calories. So probably more than most gels or more than any other gel. So there's a lot of calories. So one of those, and then on the bike, from starting on the bike, so at 0, because obviously you don't want to start counting how many gels you're having at 20 minutes, because I take them every 20 minutes. And every time I count out how many gels I'm having, I've got to remind myself to start counting at 0. That's the first one as soon as you get on the bike, not at 20 minutes.
Sure, because then you've got, maybe a 50-minute swim plus 20 minutes on the bike. You're deep into it now.
Yeah, so I don't know if a few people maybe make that mistake also. So 117 calories every 20 minutes. And I was pretty good this year. I was better than I was last year. So I put them in a flask, and that was just, there was 4 in each flask, sit them, and I had the caffeinated one separate in my back pocket, and then I took a caffeinated one every hour pretty much. Or maybe not for the first hour or 2, but then, from the
4-hour
second hour,
20 minutes.
hour,
So you're talking about 12 gels on the bike.
Yep.
And you're chasing with water only?
Water, or no, with the salt electrolyte tabs.
Okay.
So I've got electrolyte tabs in my bottles, one concentrated, with a lot more salt in that one, and then a couple more that are just over strength, but not super concentrated.
Right.
And then another concentrated one at, or just a one slightly like double quantity in at special needs. But I lost one in the first kilometre, just a regular one. So by the time I got to special needs, I was almost through the concentrated one as well. So I did have to ration that bottle from special needs. Hindsight, should have had 2 bottles at special needs of that. But it's really tough to get special needs. Like you're kind of holding the bag in your mouth, trying to get in here, and the wind's blowing you, and you got a bottle, and then you got to put that somewhere and grab the other one out of a bag. It's pretty dangerous. So it might be much nicer if they just handed you a bottle at the aid station, like they, So I had 1 bottle there. I'll try for 2 next year, so I don't. If that happens and I'm short, I don't have to ration my salt. But that was it.
Okay, let's talk about the run, and I want to talk about your training first. You said you ran in the bush growing up. Do you still prefer running trail over hard surface? Yeah,
definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. Both have their place in training. Trail is tougher, and Ben was just telling me a secret of Peter Reed's just earlier, how at the end of his long run, he'll run over boulders at the end of it to keep him really tall and light on his feet when he's tired. And without thinking that I do it, I've been doing that subconsciously. At the end of my runs, I have gone through a trail to do an extra couple of K loop after running I probably run my long run, which is 2 hours 40 sort of. I did quite a few of them. The first sort of 45 are in trails, and then maybe the last, and then actually I lie. And then it goes to like trails beside a road. So wherever I can, I will find the soft surface and run it.
And do you run speed work as well in your preparation?
Yeah, I do 2 interval sessions and 1 long run, and then a couple of easy runs if I can fit them in.
And the interval sections are always out, ever on the track?
Never on the track,
okay.
But interval sessions were, majority would have been on hard surface.
And a measured course, so you know it?
Just GPS.
Okay.
I do everything with GPS because I focus so much on technique and efficiency. So it's almost like on my long run, if I start to get too fast, I'll be like, okay, let's try and run 10 seconds per K slower than you are now, but let's do it like, 20% more efficiently. So it's always just trying to find the right pace at the right efficiency with the technique.
Are you judging that efficiency by how you feel, or are you also reading heart rate on that?
No, I don't go by heart rate, by feel.
Okay.
Just mostly by feel, yeah.
Based on everything you're telling me, I suspect you're a guy who doesn't run a power meter on your bike.
Well, I do just recently just sort of started chucking the Quark on and used it in Kona, not to go by what it was, but more just like when I had that lull, after 130K or something, had that lull, I can see that my watts are down and go, okay, they're down, that's okay. And I can see my cadence and just concentrate on my cadence, not concentrating on the wattage, but work on cadence. And then, maybe then they start to pick up a bit and go, oh, okay, I'm feeling a bit better, this is okay. And, but I wasn't driven by it at all. So, training, I haven't been driven, I'm not driven by it in training either.
Okay.
It's more just there. I've been riding on a comp trainer a lot and quite a few of my sessions. And one day I was tired, had a long ride scheduled that day, but I was tired, so I sat on the bike on the wind trainer because I couldn't think. I was like, I'm too tired to go and think where I'm going to ride, hills, cars, nutrition that I've got to pack, all that other stuff. I just wanted to ride flat and easy. So I sat on the comp trainer at 160 watts because that was all I could manage that day, which is, if you're feeling good and you're on the road, 160 watts is like hardly even putting pressure on the pedals. I rode 4 hours at 160 watts, got off, and then I felt awesome for a 10K run though, because it was like a 4-hour warm-up. But I'm not worried if I'm riding 160 watts, whereas a lot of people would probably go, this is pointless, I'm 160 watts, this is stupid, and get off the bike, or try again and push themselves harder that afternoon, or do something. Whereas you can only do what you can do. And that day, I was stoked that I stayed on the bike for 4 hours.
This is the day you're tired. You're so tired you can't think of where you're going to ride. And to ease yourself through the workout, you choose to ride on the CompuTrainer for 4 hours.
I watched movies. It was like, at 160 watts, it was as hard as I could go, but at the same time, it was easy. It was mentally, that was the limit that I could push without fatiguing myself mentally or physically. I watched movies, and but there are other days when I'm tired and I will sit on the wind trainer and I'll do 15 minutes and go, yeah, not today.
Okay. All right.
And go back and have a nap. Yeah.
So if we look at the results from men's races throughout the years at Kona, a 2:42 marathon is A, very fast, B, not often achieved. I mean, the last time we saw 2:42s happening was really when we had Dave Scott and Mark Allen battling it out for a couple of years. They're two very good runners and killing each other at the front, egging themselves onto a 2:42. And now we've got guys running, if there's guys, if they run a 2:47, sometimes that's been a winning Ironman run at Kona. Now, you're able to run a 2:42, it seems, at will.
No, I would have done it this year if I'd been able to do it at will. I ran 6 minutes slower this year, and I trained, hundreds more kilometers in training. I was running better, but you just, everything factors in. I went harder on the bike, and in theory it was a tougher day because of the crosswind, so you have to engage more muscles just to keep stable on the bike. So those factors of just what the bike took out of us, everybody's run time was slower this year. But at the same time, I did, Vallenacker was 8.5 minutes up the road, but all day, I just was in control all day. So I sat down with Belinda Granger, we went out to dinner with her and Justin and Jamie, my wife, and she was just like, I've never seen anybody win Kona as easy as you did. She's like, I cannot believe that even at the 6-7 kilometer mark, I was walking aid stations to keep cool and make sure I got enough ice. After the aid station, I stopped and I stretched out my hip flexors because my lower back was tight. And I had this race so visually done beforehand that I knew what I needed to do. And I knew that I was going to get off the bike and my lower back was going to be tight. And I knew that if I just relaxed and took it easy, and maybe if I have to, I'll stop and stretch, that I will run better in the back end. And so it was, when she reminded me that I did that, and she tells me how insane that was for her to see. And I go, yeah, okay, yeah. And it just, it is bizarre. But then once I caught Vallenacker, it was, again, suddenly I went from, about 17K mark. Oh, I might not catch him. He's still 5 minutes up the road. It's his day. He's a better athlete today. And within a K's, I'm like hearing, he's walking. I'm like, oh, okay. And as soon as I catch him, suddenly I'm in the lead with a 5-minute gap because he's pretty much pulled out. And, I got 5 minutes on the guys behind me. So suddenly at halfway in the run, I've got a 5-minute gap. All I need to do is do what I've just done for the first 20. I don't need to run any faster. I just need to do the same. So it was bizarre. And when people say, how does it feel to have won? A big part of it is it's not as, I don't remember it as well as last year. When last year it was like,
because last year you were picking them off to get up to second.
Yeah,
there was more drama.
Went from 12th to second, then Raylet came back. I went back to third. Then I had this battle with him, and I had to dig, the deepest I've ever dug in my life for that last, 6K to get away from him. And that pain and just what I went through as a race was so different to what happened this year. This year I was leading on the bike, and then I'm second off the bike.
And then halfway through the run, you've got a 5-minute gap and you're in the lead, and you don't have to dig to get to the finish. Now you just have to hold off.
Exactly. So from that point, I walked nearly every aid station. and just, yeah. And so I could have run a little bit quicker, but I just did what I needed to do to make sure I didn't do anything silly.
Okay, so take us back now. Just let's go back the last, say, 3 or 4 technical changes that you've made in the recent past. Because as you said, every year you sort of retool pieces of your race. And so every year you retool your run technique. So what was the new run technique that you brought to Kona this year? And then bring us back the last couple that you've touched on.
This year, just more Ks. So I wasn't able to run in about March, but by April I'm running and started my running build up from April through to Hawaii. So by the time I got to August, I'm running well. Whereas last year I got to August and I still did not feel like a coordinated runner because I only started running like, a couple of months before after having a stress fracture. So that was like, big change, learning how to run again. But big things this year were that, so by the time I got to August, I'm already doing long runs comfortably. So I'm able to run. I got up 3 weeks of 100K a week, which last couple of years, my biggest would have been 95, and I had 3 bigger in a row. So to me, I'm running way better, and form, I had a few sessions there where form-wise, it was really easy. A couple where it was, with the running technique that I've been working on for the last few years, this year it felt even smoother. It felt like my legs were not even doing anything. They were literally just hitting the ground, working on their own. I didn't have to put any weight in them. They did their own thing. A couple of runs just felt magic. And I just have progressed. I'm a little bit lighter on my feet, and just for the more kilometers, as any runner will tell you, kilometers do matter as well. You've got to have quality, quantity, and technique all in there. So, that running, just more Ks, made me feel a bit better. But the run technique has just been something I've worked on for like 3 years or 4 years or something, since reading Born to Run when it came out. Read that, and just inspired me and my mate to go for our runs and talk about run technique. And from that point, we started standing tall, we started pushing our hips forward, and we started bringing our feet a lot further back. And even actually before that, credit Ben and Julie in here about 5 years ago, watching me in Kona, a photo, or just watching me and go, "You're a fair heel striker, Pete." And I was like, even before I knew what a difference was between, or anybody really knew, where, we had to really get to, where it could go to. And so now, from working on that, I ran, the first 3 years ago, I ran 2:41. That was the first real race where I'd run really well with my improved technique and went, wow, this works. So the next year, I was able to train with more confidence, with pushing that technique a little bit further and going, okay, what I'm doing works, let's keep going there. Let's get the hips further forward. Let's stand up taller. Let's lean a bit further forward. And that's just been the progression over the last few years.
Hold that thought for 1 second. So for those who don't know, Born to Run, who's read it? Okay. Born to Run.
Read it. If you haven't read it yet, read it.
Born to Run, if you weren't interested in running, it's a good read still because it's a great story. But it's the book that launched this latest barefoot and minimalist shoe revolution. And Jamie, the author's name, remind me?
Chris Mcdougall.
Chris Mcdougall. Chris Mcdougall's a big guy. He's 6'2" or 6'3". He weighs 210, and he wanted to run. And he kept getting injured progressively over many years. And so he started this research, essentially, to figure out, A, why is he getting hurt? And B, how to keep that from happening. And then woven within that is this desire to chase down the Tarahumara Indian tribe that lives in northern Mexico in this canyon that's so amazing it makes the Grand Canyon look like a ditch, and to try and organize a race down there with some of the greatest endurance runners ever. And within this whole progress, he talks about shortening your stride so that you're not landing on the heel out in front, but you're landing with the foot underneath the body a little bit more. And I'm purposefully avoiding saying forefoot strike, midfoot strike, heel strike, just with the foot underneath you, regardless of what part of the foot lands first. So this is something that reached you.
Yeah, but I was lucky that I had a mate who was into running as well, and we would go on our long runs and talk about run technique for 2 hours, and then we'd do our other runs midweek, just talk about running. And, because there was the book, and before that there was Newton's, but none of these things teach you how to run. Right. None of them say, this is actually how you do it, the position you need your body in. So we taught ourselves all of that, and as we found what works, and then we started running better. And I've just, because I swam since I was little, I think, and always done sport, I'm very well connected with my body. As I am hearing more and more, most professional athletes have a very good cognitive kind of proprioception of where their muscles are. And a mind-body connection. Where things are, certainly. What's happening, and they can change things quite minimally and be aware of it. So I think I'm very fortunate that that's what I'm able to do. And so I've worked on all the tiny little things in my technique, in swimming, riding and running. And, that's why I've had my progress over the last 3-4 years. But now I know what I'm trying to think about for running. Okay. Whereas before, running was, the first time I started running, the same guy that taught me to spin was, he said, run like a Japanese marathoner. Basically squat down and heel strike, so it's like you're absorbing the shock as you go. So you're squatting down and straight and squatting. And that worked too, and that works for a lot of people. You're absorbing the shock as you go. You're not just landing and standing on your foot for a long time. So some of the same principles, but not all the principles. So that's how I started running. And then as I changed from that to the more foot landing underneath you and standing tall, things really clicked very quickly for me. And but like I said, it's still a work in progress, and think about every stride, and there's always other biomechanical issues that come into play when you're swimming and biking. It's hard to be a great runner, or you can't be a great runner. You've got to be a great triathlete. You cannot be a great runner while doing biking and swimming. So you've got to just accept that, and you'll never be a great cyclist while you're running and swimming. As soon as you start to swim, or as soon as you start to bike more, your run will just drop. And as soon as you start to run more, your bike will just drop. You just have to accept that and move on and just try and get the best balance that you can. So, accepting that over the last couple of years and kind of acknowledging that has really helped. So I remember back to what I was just going to say a little while ago about what my biking change was this year in chatting with Casey and going for my rides. A bit of that, what I was thinking about this year was that I was really trying to spin. So in that time trial position, I'm spinning a lot. But in that, over maybe last year, something I did, and I'm riding, and it was on the CompuTrainer, I think, when I discovered this new feeling, was that I wasn't letting my foot then be heavy enough on the downstroke. So I was kind of spinning too much and not giving a little bit of weight on the forefoot. And so very minute change like that on my cycling suddenly felt so much stronger. So that became what I've been thinking about in the lead up to Kona, was that. Just tiny little connections between brain and body as to what's happening, and that little bit more weight just on the forward stroke while still doing my spinning, but just a little bit there. And
then to finish us off on the technique, what's the most recent thing you've changed in the swim?
In the swim?
Yeah.
Having some issues that I've had earlier this year with my shoulder dropping and pulling forward, and that put pressure, and my third metatarsal dropped, and no one could figure out for a long time.
Wait. Your shoulder was connected to your third metatarsal? Yeah. Wait, explain that.
It took 2 months to figure out. First of all, my third met dropped, and I felt it running because I'd had a stress fracture the year before. I knew the feeling of a bruised metatarsal.
Okay.
So I went for a run, stopped straight away as soon as I felt something a bit funny. 2 months later, figure out that my ribs and shoulder are twisting this way, which hips are twisting that way, which that third met drops, and my right leg feels shorter. So everything's still not 100%, but as soon as I did some exercises that pulled this back, the third met lifts up, my heels feel more even, like my legs are the same length almost. And, but things are still not 100%. My lat still doesn't switch on, and I'm still having to pull this back. And I've got to loosen this more and do all my exercises to get lat switching on and all of that sort of stuff. To keep this back. This is it. So that's one reason why I didn't swim much this year, was because the more I found earlier this year, the problem that I had was when I swam hard, this tightened up, and I'd be pushing off the wall and feel the pressure from the start of the session switch to the outside of my foot.
Interesting.
So this was doing this and putting pressure there. In the swim, to counteract that, I was trying to focus a lot more on, instead of just trying to grab like forward this way, I was trying to grab more like lat
to fire the lat.
And shoulder, and that way, rather than trying to grab it here, just so I didn't tighten up my pec as much as I could. So there's so many different ways. When I did my stress fracture a couple of years ago, when I got back in the pool, for some reason I'd heard some things and watched another long distance swimmer in the water, and his reach was so deep and long. I was like, I'm going to try that. And I tried that and it worked, and I swam really well, but that was a lot more shoulder because my arm was so much deeper. I'd let it just stay deep rather than trying to grab the water this way. So different from last year. That's how I started swimming last year. And then this year I was like, let's just keep it more lat. So yeah, just little changes here and there to whatever my body feels is best.
So let's go back and finish this race for a minute. You've got this 5-minute gap. You get up to the top of Palani. You're running down. You're turning left. You know you've only got 2.5K left to go, maybe. What are you doing to prepare for Ali'i, which is, this is the moment for sure?
Nothing really. It was like Ali'i started at the top of Palani. Yeah. The crowd was insane from the top of Palani. And if you were watching it live, I was punching the air from top of Palani because the crowd just was going off, and it was something that I've dreamt about for 10 years. Since my first Ironman, and I did 9.5, that very first race, I was like, I want to win, and then pretty soon I want to win Hawaii. Right. So 10 years later, I'm able to do it and achieve it, and that feeling of winning was just like, opening up the best Christmas present ever. You're 10 years old, but times like 100. It's just incredible. So, and then that was just punching the air and running down the whole way. And I hadn't thought. There are times in training I think about what motivates me. What I would say if I won, and what I would do when I crossed the line. Would I have one hand up, or would I kind of do?
Would you give it a Welchie?
You sometimes, but those are the things in running when I sometimes, just amuse myself that little bit when you're out there training. You got to think of things. You got to visualize what you want. And but yeah, I didn't coming down the finish line. Wasn't thinking about anything that I'd rehearsed. It was more just like, this is just incredible. Yeah,
that's great. Okay, let's switch gears here a minute. Jamie's in the audience, your wife. Tell us, how long have you been married?
Nearly 2 years. 2 years on the 22nd of this month.
And Jamie used to have a career, but I believe she gave that up to support you in your racing. Is this true?
Yeah. Well, her career was very draining. She was working 11-day fortnights, and it was tough. But it was hard, as with a lot of people, it's hard to make a change unless it's forced upon you. Right. So part of that was, Jamie, let's go to Noosa, make a change. And you can look at jobs up there.
You were living in Sydney at the time, and her job was clearly corporate.
Yeah, it was a sales manager in the car industry, selling finance and insurance. And she loved it, and she was very good at it, and made good money. 5 minutes from home, it's like really good. The only downfall was the 11-day fortnights, right, which were pretty brutal, and didn't allow for a lot of routine for training or anything.
So for us who don't know, translate 11-day fortnights for us, please, into American.
Oh yeah, fortnight.
No, we don't use it here.
Okay,
no.
Fortnight is 2 weeks, 14 days. So she would work 8 days or 8 days, have 1 day off, then work like another 6 or something, and then have 2 days off.
So she would pack in 11 days within 2 weeks, and it was just really demanding.
Yeah, because you don't get that weekend and that 2 days to actually get out of work zone. And so it was that. Let's force the change and go to Noosa. And by the time we get to Noosa, it's like, okay, we're only here for 6 or 7 weeks. Then we're going to go to the States for 7 weeks. And then we're going to come back for 7 weeks. Then we're going to go to America for 2 weeks. So it ended up that, there was no time to actually for her to actually look for a job, because we were going to be
7 weeks later, you're gone.
So, but she took on the role that I was doing more when she was working a lot more in Sydney, and I was doing a lot more of the housework at home. So suddenly I was not having to do all the housework and cooking and cleaning and that kind of stuff. And I got a few more hours each week maybe a couple of hours every day.
And more quality rest too. For
more recovery. Yeah. So the recovery time on the foam roller, time stretching, time doing my physio exercises, having a nap, and even just getting on the wind trainer, the CompuTrainer for recovery, 45-minute spin, those sort of little things that I could do in the evening, yeah, made a big difference.
Mm-hmm. And you and Jamie speak of having children?
Yeah, she's enjoying looking after little Zali this week.
Good, okay.
We only started mentioning it the other month. It's always been a long way off, and but it's still a long way off. But now she's actually like, yeah, one day I would like to have kids, as opposed to never. Yeah. So
now, I want to ask you about this because what we're seeing now is a lot of speed coming out of ITU. And a lot of those guys who've been in that realm now for 5, 6, 7, maybe even 10 years now coming out and coming into longer distance, which is a natural progression. And there's been a lot of talk about how we're expecting some of those athletes to really change the race format at Ironman and really do well. Now, as we look and watch that happen, you know, Chris McCormick took essentially 2 years off from Ironman racing to chase that Olympic dream. He put on a lot of speed. People expected things from him at Kona this year. It didn't happen. Yeah. Dirk Bockel was the first off the bike in Beijing. He's had a full career at ITU. He comes into Ironman and hasn't run away with it by any means. But then we see Yvonne Rana step away from ITU. He goes down to Cancun. He wins his first. Do you contemplate that future? What do you think about it?
Of them coming up?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't bother me. They're going to have the same problems that every other athlete has. Yeah, any guy, and just Hawaii is the prime example. The more pressure, the more they think they have to train. And you know, Terenzo is the prime example of coming from short course to Ironman and just training. He trains more than anyone almost. And I think a lot of the ITU guys might find that they need to do that because they're so used to smashing themselves in run sessions and bike sessions and swim sessions particularly. Finding that level of doing a few interval sessions but not too much, and then how many hours. It's same issue anybody will have, and you know, they're not going to come and be any better than anybody else. The difference is whether they can peak for a race better than anyone else. You know, I think this year in Kona I had my perfect preparation, and you know, you have to have perfect preparation to have the perfect race. And I think there's so many good guys racing 70.3 these days and halves and everything that if you're not peaking for that race, then you're not going to win it. You know, you've got to pick your race and peak for it because, yeah, it's a very tough race doing a half and doing it well and being able to hammer yourself for 4 hours. Yeah. You know, you do have to have a lot more of your energy stored up well than you do in ITU. In ITU, you can kind of do whatever you wanted the day before probably, and it's not going to affect that upper threshold limit of what you do as much as trying to hit that really efficient level for 4 hours. So it's just whether they can learn how to prepare for the racing without overdoing it. And look, like I said, they're obviously very elite athletes and they just got more fast twitch fibers, but you know, I think they can change that into slow twitch fibers pretty quickly. And yeah, there's no reason why they won't do well. I think I'm telling some of the young guys that are looking at Ironman and they want to do Kona in the next few years maybe, and I tell them, look, I think I could have won Kona years ago. It wasn't my physical ability that held me back. It was my focus and my preparation that was. So I said, you have to have that focus, and it was that difference of going from, you know, believing, oh yeah, I think, look, I can win Kona one year, like I always thought since I was, you know, 22 or something, to this year going, this is the year I want to win, you know, and doing everything that I could to win. And so that's basically what I'm telling them. Like, don't go into it thinking, look, I'll just practice and I'll do this one and just see how I go. I'm like, you just got to want it and focus on it with everything that you've got, and you'll do well because they're all phenomenal athletes.
Now, the World Triathlon Corporation that owns the Kona brand has created a KPR, Kona Pro Ranking, and it forces athletes to race often and earn enough points and get to a place, and also they have to finish an Ironman within that, because they can earn points at the 70.3 distance as well, to then make it to Kona. Except once you have won a world championship within the Ironman family, so that includes Kona, that includes the 70.3 World Championships, and it includes the 5150 series, which may or may not be with us much longer, but regardless. Now that you have won this title, that puts you in a position where all you have to do to make it to Kona in the future is just finish one Ironman.
For 5 years.
For 5 years, okay.
It runs out.
So I didn't know that. Okay, that's good. So does that change your thinking as to how much you'll race next season?
Next season's up in the air, and I've written out my kind of what I'd like to do, but it does depend on contracts with race directors.
Sure.
And WTC are the race director for many races, and they're currently asking a lot of me, but not willing to pay as much as other races like Challenge or something.
Oh,
so
fascinating.
I'm in this position where I do
just
need
stop
to
for a
make
second
those
because I want everybody to understand. This is what we would call an appearance fee.
Yeah, yeah.
You're the world champion. We want you to come to our race because we know if you're there, it'll bring in a lot of other age groupers to see you, and that's important. And so what you're saying is the World Triathlon Corporation is offering an appearance fee, but not as nice as what we can really say is their best competitor right now with the Challenge family.
Yeah. And they have different rules. They want exclusivity, and they want this and they want that. They want a lot of things, which I'd love to do. I'd love to be an ambassador for them. But to do that, I can't race Challenge, certainly not, and probably not something like a Rev 3 or, you know, Wildflower or another race. So it's like, yeah, I'd love to do that job for you. You know, that'd be fantastic. But, you know, if I can't race any other race, it's going to limit my earnings. And at the moment, well, they're just not going to, they don't think it's worth that. They think I owe them something. So it's not really going anywhere. But I've written up my perfect plan, and, you know, it's races all around the world, which, you know, isn't appearance fee written in because I don't know if they will or will not for some of them. But some of it's also, you know, certain sponsors are in certain events, things like that. So I don't know my schedule at all for next year, unfortunately, yet. I'd love it if it was already done and dusted.
Right.
But, you know, it's very tricky. And then there's like, well, they don't, if WTC won't do it, then the Asia Pacific Ironman guys would like me to do stuff for them. So then it becomes and then it's like all these other things. Well,
And do you have somebody helping you with this?
yeah, my manager does all of that.
Excellent,
I sort of tell him what I'd like and races where I think I can do well, or the races that I want to do mostly. And then it'll be the same between the last 3 months or 2.5 months for Kona will be exactly the same. I'll race Philippines 70.3 early August, 5th of August, and then go back to Noosa and just train for Kona and not go anywhere.
Okay.
So that's what I've done. I've trained in Sydney for Hawaii the last few years, or forever, pretty much. And I just like being at home more. So there'll be nothing in, you know, from Philippines.
All right, let's stay on this business track for just a moment longer. You know, within all of the segments of triathlon, the bike business really has the deepest pockets.
Yeah.
I'm astounded that the Brownlee brothers, who went gold and bronze, and you ride Boardman.
Yeah.
And I can't help but think back, you know, within that segment, the bike business, they like to count the number of brands on the pier each year and then broadcast that. And companies work very hard to win that because they take great pride, as they should, perhaps. And I know that there have been times in the past, I think maybe Norman Stadler won on a quota, probably the only quota in the race that year, and then kaboom, the next year, 60 of them.
Yeah.
So I have a whole lot of questions about Boardman.
Yeah.
Have you ever met him? Can this company keep you now? Can they afford to keep you? Do we expect to see even 5 Boardmans now next year in Kona? So bring us up to speed on that.
Chris Boardman held the yellow jersey at the Tour de France a couple of times because he was a time trialist, so he'd won the prologue a couple of times. He's got world record in the 1 hour. He held that for forever almost. There was a Jack Bobridge, an Australian, that might have just took one of his records. So phenomenal time trialist, and built his own aerodynamic, different bike to everyone else to do that. And he then works for one of the UK channels, does all the broadcasting, and he was on the British team for track cycling, looking at every single little detail down to whether there's different stitching on the seam of their pants on the track could make a difference aerodynamically. So everything. He's an absolute science man and loves it. And he did not start the company. Alan Ingerfield, who used to be a professional triathlete from the UK, 10 years ago, he went to Chris and wanted to start the company. So Chris became a partner in the company and helped design the bikes, of course. And then they approached me 2 years ago after I did well at Kona and said, "What's your current deal?" And I said, "Well, I'm open from now." And so yeah, I said, I'd love to. And they came along. He was, Alan Ingerfield was one of those guys like what everybody is. A year later, everybody was kind of doing, but he was a year ahead, saying, I pick you. You've had great results, and I follow it, and I see you as someone who can win Hawaii. So to have that a few years back was, the first person to kind of say that and give me the support to get there. So down the path, they've been on, the Brownlees have been with them since the Brownlees were like 16 pretty much, since they were young. And they've got a really good relationship with them because, Chris Boardman is from the UK. They just run a pretty good ship. They obviously they would sell more bikes if they had them more in front of people to buy. They went through Wiggle the last couple of years, and we'll see what happens next year. They will be keeping us next year.
Does loyalty mean more to you than money?
There's a lot of it. There's a big part of that, and coming back to talking about appearance fees and that sort of stuff. And I'm saying to them, I'm like, it doesn't come down to money. It comes down to two things in business, obviously, what you get paid and the relationship. Sure. And the relationship is worth a lot as well. And I've got a good relationship with Boardman, and they had, like I said, they had that foresight first, and that's really great. But also that to appear loyal, to be able to appear in the same photos 1 year from the next is easy. All your marketing's done for the next 12 months. So the relationship counts for a lot, and just the support of them saying, "Have you got everything?" or "Well done," and this is what we want to do with you. This is where we'll go with you. This is our future, and here's the prototype of next year's bike, and we're going to get it to you first. And all of that sort of stuff.
Excellent.
They put you on a pedestal and make you feel nice, and that's all it takes a lot of the time. But you don't get that everywhere.
If we look back starting at 2007, we had Chris McCormick. The next year we had Craig Alexander, and then Craig Alexander, then Chris McCormick, then Craig Alexander, and you. We have had an Aussie domination at Kona for some time running now. What's in the water? Why? How do we get some of that here? U.S. is behind the eight ball in a big way for a long time now.
Yeah. Kona, as I said, it's a different sport. That's a different one. But Chris and Craig have been the best in the sport in triathlon at any distance for 10 years. They've been up there. It's no surprise that they did well in Kona. They're very good runners, and they're very good at focusing and doing what needs to be done. They've been in the sport a lot longer than I have, so they already knew how to focus and get to where they wanted to go, and they knew what they wanted. But they also had the ability, and the running efficiency in Kona, I think, is the biggest part of having a good split in Kona. Efficiency in the heat. You run anywhere in the heat, and if you've got bad form, you will sink at the hips so quick, and you'll lose a minute a kilometre as soon as your hips sink back and your chest drops. So that's a huge part of it. If you've got that sort of a technique and tend towards that in Kona when it's hot and your heart rate's those 5-10 beats higher, I don't know how much it affects, but it's that much harder physically and mentally. You will lose a lot of time on the run. And I love looking back at the footage of Andy Raylett and I when we were side by side, and we're going this way, I'm leaning forward and he's upright. So he just squats that little bit down and he lands that little bit like an inch further in front of his body than I do. But in a marathon, when it's that hard and it's that hot and it's at the back end of a marathon, those little inches of him being straight instead of leaning forward an inch and his foot landing an inch further in front. Those little things make the differences, and running efficiency is a big thing that I say is the difference for why myself and the other guys do well in Kona over the other guys as well. I think that's a big part of it. There's no secret. I think it's just coincidence.
Okay, so let's take a few minutes and we'll just open it up to the floor and take some questions from the audience. Anyone? Brian?
You said that on the bike, you guys were working, he was like, come on, let's work together. How does that work in a non-draft legal way?
It just takes the pressure off mentally setting the pace. You can just follow for a little bit. I think, I think mentally, sometimes it's easier to follow, sometimes it's harder to follow. I think I do better in front, but at that point I just need someone else to set the pace. I need to just be able to just drift off the back a little bit and then come back up when I'm feeling a bit better, and just have a little time out from guys kind of coming past you or worried about if they're going to be thinking you're going slow. It's just you're taking a little time out from the race almost at that point of the race. Other points of the race it's a lot harder. For me, sometimes it's like, oh geez, I got to bridge that gap. I don't want it to get too big when I'm trying to catch up to them. So I don't always like being behind, but at that point it was just a little time out.
And 12 meters is our new rule, so are you getting any benefit when you're sitting 12 meters back?
Heading up to Harvey, uphill, into a headwind, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a lot easier. Because 12 meters, but that wind was going so strong straight at you.
Yeah. Question over here, yeah. Jerry.
What do you do for strength and conditioning and recovery?
Just my physio exercises, which are mostly just either my own body weight or just non-weight bearing, but it's more connecting up the pathways and getting range of motion. So working on range of motion and switching on muscles, not having to load them up a lot with weight or anything, but just doing movements which switch the right muscles on and increasing range of motion is what I work on. In terms of strength, as far as it would go, would be like, one-legged squats, but, with no weights, just doing one-legged squats for stability and strength. And then, what was your other question? Sorry.
Recovery.
Recovery. Foam roller, a little bit of gua sharing with a spoon or whatever you've got, which is basically just rubbing up along the skin, pushing in your skin with the edge of a spoon.
Like
just helps release
almost
the
like
fascia.
a scraping?
Yeah, scraping up your skin. It can help release the fascia.
And what's the term you used? Gua
Gua.
Gua.
Yeah. Some masseuses or physios will know about that.
Yeah,
And
okay.
rolling on balls, on my glutes, sitting on them, and just constantly, just if I'm sitting there watching television, stretching or...
Do you have those things that they
No, I don't do the Normatec boots. No, I don't have those.
Those are nice.
I hear they're nice, yeah, but at the same time, I got explained one way of how lymphatic drainage can work, and that it's almost the reverse to the Normatec. I'm sure they do something, but it's almost, someone told me the lymphatic, you want to pull up and move things up so you create a space for the next bit. And then I heard, that the Normatec boots will seal up and come this way, which I'm sure that does something too. Flushes, but I haven't used them. It's like altitude training to me. Instead of sitting in a Normatec boot, I'd rather be just like laying on the floor stretching or twisting or sitting on a ball or something, rather than there are things, there's little things, but like altitude, unless I had everything absolutely perfect and found that there was room to add another thing to try, I don't see the point, particularly when, it can go very wrong, like Macca found this year. Got the altitude timing wrong and was just super flat race day. So
I know a lot of people are curious about that. Tell us what Chris has told you about his trouble coming down from altitude.
He said it worked really well when he went from Switzerland to Spain earlier in the year and he won the ITU Worlds. He said he felt awesome. But then going from Arizona to Hawaii, they sort of, it's all about trying to get the numbers right. And the numbers, they just got it wrong. And I guess everybody's different. It's everything in my training is more of an art form than a science. And, when you listen to how they plan the altitude, coming down from altitude, that sounds like they're trying to get us as a science. And, the body's just a bit more up and down than that. And he got it wrong.
He got it wrong mainly because of the duration, right? He came down
Yeah,
the time period.
3 days
before
out sort of thing, yeah. I think he's either said 3 days longer or shorter or something. Would have been better, yeah. So it's tough to do. But then at the same time, I was chatting with another mate in training the other day, and it's like, okay, Crowe every year has trained in Boulder, right? If it makes that much of a difference, wouldn't he be going a lot faster than everyone else? Like, he's a phenomenal athlete. I can't see that when you're pushing your body at like, that 70%, 75% or 80% all day, you're just going on efficiency, and whether having an extra few blood cells, maybe that matters better for when you're trying to go for 4-minute max and, you just need as much as you can maybe out of your blood. It might have a clearer benefit. But, for 8 hours, my friend and I figured 8-hour race, maybe it just doesn't make any difference whether you've got that extra blood in your body or not, because it's only going to use, what it can take anyway. So that was one theory that we had, because, like I said, the guys aren't doing anything amazing that go to altitude. It's not like they go to altitude and then go from being slow to being incredible. They were always incredible. So that's my theory.
What's your mental training, and what is your mind focusing on? I mean, are you constantly checking in with how you're feeling or your strategy, or what do you mentally do?
In training or during the race?
Well, mentally in training for preparation, and then in when you're racing.
In training, every now and then I'll either visualize a portion of the race, and or I'll visualize like a tough patch, like coming down into the last kilometre with Crowe beside me, and suddenly all these doubts came into my mind, and it was like, suddenly you lose track of what you're focusing on, and you think, oh, he's Crowe, he's faster, he's won this before, and all these subconscious doubts come into your mind, and you lose focus on your running, and you don't run as well. So in training, when I'd done that, I noticed that, and then 2 weeks before Hawaii, I went to a kinesiologist who just tests all my vitamins and minerals and strength tests me, like witch doctor, like if you're a non-believer. And but it works. And so he did all my vitamins and minerals, and then my mentor, Al Pittman, who knows me very well and can read people really well, and he was in the room and said, okay, I'll throw this scenario up. What if Pete's running next to Macca and everybody's cheering for him, for Chris, and not for Pete? And the kinesiologist is looking at me, yeah, no, he's fine with that. And he comes over and tests me and like, yeah, no, he's fine with that. And then he's like, okay, what about his, coming down the finish line and he's next to Craig Alexander and this guy's won it 3 times. And then suddenly, and the kinesiologist is like, hang on, you've lost him. He's looking at you, you've lost him. He comes over and my arm just drops and I drop. And he's like, a big part of it, that was the love that you might have heard on the finish line it all came from the kinesiologist, was a way to focus my mind on the positives, not the negatives. So another thing was just the doubters, the other people who, and all those sort of things like social media and what have you nowadays. You hear all things that you wouldn't have heard before. And he's like, you just got to love everybody and, love the people even if they're trying to crucify you, because that is how you feel, free and feel more focused. So that was the mantra I went into for the last, 2 weeks leading into Kona. And I used that word throughout race day and in training, even visualizing in training. I was running and I'd do that same scenario again, finish shoot, Crowe, and I'd go, oh, yeah, your mind just goes blank and then just you say, so, oh, love, and just use the word love, and it just cleared my mind of those doubts that I had of that visualizing of Crowe. And I definitely used it a lot in race week and race day, and it worked. And it's just kind of that.
It's great.
It's very basic, it's very, very basic.
A lot of people talk about Wellington running, racing with a smile all the time, and what that manifests within that. I know that the woman who won the Badwater 135 overall, she would run with this wide-eyed look about her, and she spoke of how she was drawing in all the beautiful energy with her eyes because she would purposefully run with this open look about her to try and
Yeah,
bring in
I'm
more
never
life.
going to look like that.
Don't do that.
But
don't do it. Stay with the love, though.
But it's more of a way of positive affirmation and putting a name to that of positive affirmation of being more open, more forgiving, and
much more uplifting than being
and,
angry or hating.
Yeah,
or competitive
and also just remembering why you're out there as well. Like, it obviously hurts really bad, and it's tough, and it's hot, and it's just a way of saying, I'm here because I love it. I choose to be here. I love the training, and I love the heat. I love that it's tough. You know, you wouldn't do it if it was easy. That's why we do the Ironman. So it's just a way of reaffirming why you're there and that you choose to be there and you enjoy being there. So, but otherwise you can go down that negative path of this is too hard, this is too hot, you know, all of that other stuff. You know, you've chosen to be there. This is what you want. So enjoy it.
My preference would be to end on that question, but let's take two more. Jamie.
So we've had many speakers throughout time with the LATriClub, and you seem to be the most triathlete full in terms of physicality and mindset, and I applaud you for that. I've never heard a triathlete come with such a complete package in the preparation for triathlon, and I applaud you for that. So I want to depart from that, and I want to ask you, what is your favorite silly movie that you sort of go to on the trainer? What is your favorite go-to junk food when you want to say, chuck everything just for a moment, I want to just spoil myself? And what is your favorite odd thing to do to sort of de-stress yourself that maybe nobody knows about?
First of all, I like, this year I started liking milkshakes. So I've taken myself off ice cream the last few years leading into Kona, the last few months. You know, I just make it up with a lot of yogurt. But good yogurt. But in taking myself off ice cream, you know, I started getting onto just chocolate milks, you know. But I did, years ago, I went off milk for a while and had rice milk all the time and thought, I'll try this and it'll be better for me, blah, blah, blah. And everything, I've tried complete gluten-free, I've tried all of this stuff because I've battled with fatigue, and you try and find out what's causing it. Every time I've tried something, nothing ever comes up. It's purely just the yin and the yang, body gets tired, you just need to rest it. You know, you can't put a name to everything. So, and anyway, this last, you know, leading into Hawaii, I got back on chalky milk, and it was just an awesome treat after training, as the ad says, you know. I'm not paid by them, that's not one of my sponsors.
It's the brown gator.
That's right.
Yeah. So that, and since Kona, because I didn't have ice cream for so long, I haven't wanted ice cream since. I've just kind of gone over that hump now, I guess. Hopefully it comes back to me one day. But yeah, milkshakes are more of a craving now. Favorite silly movie? I love, one of my all-time favorites is Adam Sandler's The Wedding Singer. You know, sure. I love that. You know, trainer movies, it's great if it's got some music in it, you know. So something where people are singing a bit. And there was a time back in Sydney where me and one of my mates, he started it and I just happened to join in his garage. We were watching Glee.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I could not sit and watch that in the lounge room to save my life. But on the trainer, where you don't think, obviously it pretty much repeats itself and you don't have to keep up with the plot. But the songs come on, and like when you're out training and running, you listen to an iPod because music can send some endorphins that help you focus and give you some adrenaline. You can perform better. So it's nice to have something. It was nice to have Glee that every now and then you got that little shiver of, you know, motivation from them singing, you know. What's that song?
A pop song that's very popular.
Yeah,
sure,
some pop song,
sure.
and all their big hits, you know, the well-known ones. But yeah, so that worked, but more just any other movie.
Silly movie, treat, and yeah, oddball de-stress activity.
I do like just taking photos, you know, bit of a photography, but I don't get to do that often. And don't know. It's been a while. It's been a while since I've had time to do anything.
Laurie?
Do you do any sort of meditation?
No, I don't, but Jamie and I mentioned this the other day, with all the travel that we do, we tried to think, we just kind of said to ourselves, well, I guess sometimes maybe jet lag is not so much the body being jet lagged, but more the mind, and it would be nice if, you know, maybe, you know, the mind's not used to traveling all these time zones like that. You know, if we sat on a boat for 6 months to get from UK to Australia, you know, you got time to adjust. But we just looked at it, we sort of just walking along and having a conversation. Went, oh, this is, you know, maybe we should look at meditation, because just for those times when we've traveled a lot and you need to just get back to one place, it may help. You know, I haven't looked into it at all, but it's funny, just the other day we said that, and so we might look into it. And then we mentioned a couple of elite athletes that we think probably do it, or retired elite athletes that are now life coaches. Might get in touch with one of them, and I'm sure he does a bit of it. He works with Kelly Slater a lot. He's an ex-surf Ironman from Australia, Trevor Hendy. And yeah, he's a very well-known life coach and he's very good mates with Kelly Slater and has worked with him a lot. So he might have a few little nuggets of information for us.
We really appreciate you coming and sharing your time with us. Such a treat.
Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you.